Part 31. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 301. Lu Feng was surprised just now. It stands to reason that it is impossible for someone like Lu Qiudong to come in person for an arrest of this scale. Now everything is clear. It turned out to be rushing to dig Huang Youwei's corner. You and Huang are always classmates, right? You call him President Huang, Lu Qiudong asked in surprise. When I met him, he was the general manager of a state-owned enterprise, so I'm used to it, Lu Feng explained. We are high school classmates. As you know, there are a lot of people in a high school class, and Lao Huang is not very close to me. That is, the relationship between sleeping in the bed. After resuming the college entrance examination, he was admitted to a normal university. I'm already working in the power supply system, so I didn't take the test, or else what's the matter with him, Lu Qiudong said with a bit of regret. You said yes. Yes, Lu Feng nodded again and again. He really did not expect that Huang Youwei was in his 30s when he just resumed the college entrance examination more than 10 years ago, and he was admitted to the university. None of these people can climb up easily. I've said everything I need to say. What do you mean? Lu Feng was a little embarrassed by the questioning. He smiled and said, I haven't got a firm footing yet. You have already established yourself. With such a large-scale private enterprise, and you have survived in an industry with high barriers to entry such as electronics, you have established yourself. When I called Lao Huang to talk about this, I will give you an estimate. The time is, after the new year. How about after the new year? Dead, Lu Qiudong said simply. No, the domestic business environment is still okay. What is the current business environment? I know better than you. There are 9 liars out of 10 businessmen, and the remaining one is a big liar. You can be a big liar. You are a big liar among big liars, Lu Qiudong nodded. A cigarette, facing Ye Feng, said, I'm curious where your startup capital is. This is a commercial secret, Lu Feng said with a wry smile. During the Chinese New Year, I took a group to Suzhou for inspection and had a drink with Lao Huang. I told him that you have insufficient funds, and the startup funds must be from the local financial industry or policy subsidies. You are well versed in doing this. Lu Qiudong took a puff of cigarette and said in silence for a long time. Old Huang said at the time, if you dare to attack him, he will smash your head. Huh, Lu Feng didn't expect the gentle Huang Youwei to say such a thing. It was drinking talk at the time, but I can see that he didn't dare to take too much risk on you, so I said at the time, you will definitely have nothing to write about after the new year. Lu Qiudong stood there smoking a cigarette, watching Moon murmured, I haven't heard of any city being deceived recently. Lu Feng was very speechless. Huang Youwei told him too much, and his image in Lu Qiudong's heart was not very good. It is estimated that Huang Youwei told him at that time that he must guard against that kid, and his methods were very dirty. You said you won't come? As long as you come, the land will be tax-free and free, and I will let you cheat and give you an interest-free loan. Lu Qiudong turned his head and asked, how? I will definitely consider it carefully. You can rest assured that Xiaoshan is a good place. The company will gain a firm foothold and the market will increase in sales. It will definitely be a branch, Lu Feng said with a serious look. I know, I have to ask you now, but there is no result. It's getting late, and you should go back to rest early. Originally, I wanted to invite you to dinner and let the people from the investment promotion office meet you. So many people were arrested. I'm afraid I won't have time for a while. I'll treat you to dinner. We have a chance. As long as you are free, I can do it anytime, Lu Feng said politely. Okay, let's talk less about this kind of scene another day, Lu Qiudong said and walked slowly to the yard. Hu Yaoking's group had all been pressed away, and their cars were all seized. The yard was sealed. Not far away a police car was parked there, shining brightly. Go back, I'm afraid that Huan Yue will be in a hurry, and I'm afraid that I will kidnap his beloved baby. Ha 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 ha, no, Lu Feng was amused by him and said, then you should rest early, I'll go back first. Lu Qiudong waved his hand and said nothing. Lu Feng turned his head and saw He Ziyawei standing there. He waved at her and said, go back, your mission is over, right? He Ziyawei nodded and watched Lu Feng get into the car and drive away. There was a sense of loss in her heart. She thought about it for a while and smiled. She and others are two worlds. Most people in this world, all are passers-by. Lu Qiudong sighed and muttered to himself, Huan Yue had always had better luck than him when he was in school, and this is still the case in middle age. When will he meet such a pawn who can resist and fight? It was almost midnight when he returned to the hotel. When he opened the door of the room, Lu Feng found that there was actually a person sitting in his room. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be Li Na. Why did you run into my room? Lu Feng wondered, you haven't slept so late. Those people suddenly left, saying that they received a call, and the protection ended tonight. Li Na stood up in a panic and said, it won't happen tonight, right? How are you talking to Hu Yaoking? Seeing her like a frightened bird, Lu Feng sighed and sat down to change his slippers. He also sighed in his heart that she was a hard worker, and said, don't be afraid, sit down, Hu Yaoking's gang has already been arrested, just they were evacuated because they were caught. Caught? Lu Feng nodded and said, don't worry, I won't be able to come out in the short term. Maybe the crime is serious, so I'll be shot immediately, and I'll take over the factory tomorrow. It's great, retribution. It's really retribution. Li Na clenched her hands in excitement, her eyes shone brightly, and the light dripped down her cheeks. It will get better. You have to believe in the reincarnation of heaven. I believe that if Tianying is in the spirit of heaven, I hope you will live a good life. Lu Feng stood up and comforted, with some compassion in his expression. Thank you so much. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't even know what to do. Li Na grabbed Lu Feng's hand tightly, her mouth filled with words of thanks, and she started to cry as she spoke. Lu Feng's gratitude from her was a little out of place, and the pity in his expression was quickly withdrawn, and he sat down and said, that's right, I told you back then that the factory is coming back, and I want to buy it, is based on this condition to help you, so you don't have to thank us, we are collaborators. Then I want to thank you too. Li Na can clearly feel that Lu Feng has changed too fast. Just now, he was definitely showing his true feelings and really sympathizing with him, but now he is in a business-like state, and he is in a state of business affairs. Profits are not compromised at all. Let me tell you now, what's going on with the equity between you and Manager Ma. I don't care, I want 51% of the controlling stake. I can give you a price of 5 million, this is the industry. At the same time, I want the right to operate, of course, I will reserve the right of the board of directors for you, and there will be dividends later, this money will definitely allow you to live a stable life. Li Na suddenly felt a little uncomfortable facing such a serious Lu Feng. She just nodded and said, I'm an orphan and a widow, you can do it? What are you talking about? It's like I bully orphans and widows. If you're like this, find a lawyer, do a valuation, and then draft a prospectus. I'm a serious businessman, and I'm innocent. Lu Feng looked at the time and said, today is too late, go to bed early and start busy tomorrow. Oh, Li Na only nodded and stood up a little bewildered, then I'm going back. Okay, go to bed early. As soon as Li Na left, Lu Feng breathed a long sigh of relief. The matter was finally settled. The raw material matter was temporarily relieved. He moved his body and was about to take a hot bath when the phone rang suddenly. Which one? Lu Feng answered the phone. It's me, Huan Yue, did you just come back? Hearing this kind of question, Lu Feng felt strange, it didn't look like something between two big men. For it. Come back in about 20 minutes. Lu Qiudong invited you to dinner. No, no, just chatting for a while. You still haven't rested? I'm already lying on the bed. I'm not worried about you. After all, the arrest scene is chaotic, and it's not good to bump into it, right? Huang Youwei said politely. Don't talk about it. I didn't see you caring about your children, and you don't sleep on the phone at night. There was a complaint from Huang Youwei's wife. What do you know as a woman? You sleep with you. Lu Feng was a little happy listening to the couple's words. No matter what the purpose was, if they could care about him, his heart would also be warm. It's fine, you should rest early. Lu Feng, don't listen to Lu Qiudong's nonsense. I knew who he was when I was in school, and you dealt with honest people like me. If you meet him, you will be deceived by your pants. Be safe, you know. Do not. I know, don't worry. Let me tell you, this electronics factory is now a key project, not only in the city, but also in the province. If you run away, I'll tell you, you've offended everyone in Jiangsu, understand? I understand, I really understand. Lu Feng couldn't help laughing and laughing. This was too scary, as if he moved out, the provincial and city people would eat him alive. After asking a few more questions, he hung up the phone. Lu Feng took a shower and went to sleep. Early the next morning, Lu Feng took Li Na to spend money on an urgent magazine and published a statement about Tianying Copper. In the morning, he took the formalities and documents to the Industry and Commerce Bureau to change the owner of the company. Having a meal at noon, I signed the equity transfer contract by the way. After 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I came to Tianying Copper's office again. Manager Ma sat there with a pale face. In the morning, she got the news that Hu Yaoqing was arrested, and she knew that everything was over, completely over. High-speed text handwriting returns to the 1989 chapter list. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 302. Lu Feng stood at the door and looked at this woman in her 40s. In just a few days, she had lost her spirit and high spirits, and all that was left was a look of decadence. Manager Ma sighed, raised his head and stared at Lu Feng and said, "Mr. Hu told me that we little people can only see the tip of the iceberg in this game, and then I think it's over. I am also a small person." In this magnificent era, who is not a small person, Lu Feng said. You're laughing at yourself. I'm really a small person. President Hu said you're a businessman. I don't believe it. I didn't expect you to mobilize so much energy. Since you have this ability, why waste so much effort in recording? The sky-high fire needs to be lit by a single spark. Without that recording, the latter would not be able to do it, and I didn't think about it that much. It's the pen on the coffee table, right? Manager Ma said with a wry smile. I've lived for more than 40 years, but I still have too little knowledge. My life is also bad, and my daughter is harmed. Jiao Jiao is a good girl, you hurt her, her nature is not bad, it's fine if you leave here, you can spend time with her, I think it's money or not, if you don't have time to spend with yourself my dearest, why do you need so much money? Lu Feng looked at her and said, will you burn it for yourself after you die? You are the winner, what you say is what you say, you don't need to tell me the big truth, don't you also run around the world? Manager Ma stood up, her things were packed, looked at Li Na and said, I give up my 7% equity, and I will walk out of here with my own things, and I will be different from now on. Li Na stared blankly at the woman who had worked hard for the company for more than 10 years, and said, I'll just ask you a question, is the car accident really an accident? Yes. Why didn't you go suddenly that day? Get out of the car. There is a problem with the bank transfer of finance, and a person in charge needs to go to the bank to sign. Now, I have nothing to hide. At the end of last year, Mr. Tian borrowed from Hu Yaoqing, and Hu Yaoking wanted to set up a bureau to take over the factory, but didn't Mr. Tian go to a dinner party after the new year. Manager Ma spoke very calmly, as if telling someone else's story. Mining is a very oily industry, and copper mines are monopolized. There are also many secrets in the industry. If you want to become stronger and bigger, it is not determined by the market, but by those big men. Mr. Tian got the promise and got it. For very large orders, the promise is not to supply GFN electronics. Hu Yaoking wants to start. He had to have the guts, so he pushed it back. The time he set was 1 month later. Who would have thought that the accident would come earlier than planned? I have said everything I need to say. After Li Na heard all this, her whole face was full of tears, and she fell to the ground and suffered like a child. Lu Feng sighed, the upper-level business competition is bad, and the bottom-level business competition is now even more brutal. Many businessmen secretly are all kinds of big brothers. If the normal business competition fails to achieve their goals, they start to attack. Occupying companies, hiring people to smash and smashing, contract fraud, and inversion of right and wrong are everywhere. Lu Feng is just passing through the bottom business quickly. If not, he will have a harder time. Can I go? Manager Ma calmly looked at Li Na, who was slumped to the ground, and said, I have asked the lawyer, I have to sit for a year or two at most and exchange equity for equity, which is considered equal. Exchange. Li Na is a very simple person. Since she married Tian's family, she has basically been looking after her husband and raising her children. She never thought that the world at home was a sky that Tianying had propped up for her. Everyone in the outside world was wearing a mask, she guessed. Well. Manager Ma took out a contract from a folder and put it on the table. He picked up a box and walked towards the door. When passing by Li Na, he stepped over without hesitation. The two have known each other for almost 10 years, and Li Na has always thought that she is a big sister who can be trusted. At this time, she realized that many things are just her own opinion. Lu Feng wanted to comfort Li Na, but he didn't know what to say. He walked to the table and saw a few newspapers. The headline was Hu Yaoking's photo. This city has cracked a gang of underworld forces headed by Hu Yaoking, and I hope the citizens will actively report it. The major case is shocking. According to preliminary calculations, the funds involved in the case are as high as 30 million. This person supports thugs and monopolizes mining transportation. Collect clues from the whole society, report rewards, keep personal information confidential, and report actively. These 3 headlines are all soliciting clues. After a cursory glance, they mainly focus on mining transportation, occupying a route by force, and now there have been 3 murder cases, and more people have been injured and maimed. Lu Feng put down the newspaper, and now he believes Hu Yaoking's words. This is his territory, angering him. It is not impossible to kill someone. You can't be resurrected from the dead, you live a good life. I will send someone over to hand over to you in a few days. You provide me with a bank account, and the company will transfer money through the public-to-public account. Lu Feng looked at her and said. Li Na stood up, didn't speak, and stumbled out. Seeing that she was a little dazed, Lu Feng hurriedly ran after her and asked, Where are you going? I'm fine, go pick up my son, don't worry, I will live well, and the factory will be handed over to you. Li Na stood at the end of the corridor and looked at Lu Feng, begging, don't change your name, it's okay. Of course, Tianying Copper is very nice. Thanks. Lu Feng watched her go downstairs and went back to the office to sort out several contracts. He walked around the factory, and the entire factory was extremely quiet. Everyone in the office had no intention of working, they were all looking around, or chatting with each other, and when they saw Lu Feng, they stopped talking. In the factory now, people are panicking. Too many things have happened in the past few days. Just now, Li Na stumbled out and many people said she was crazy. Lu Feng arrived at the marketing department's office, knocked on the door, and asked, "Who is in charge?" "Me." A man in his 30s stood up, looking at Lu Feng. He was a little overwhelmed. He didn't know what was going on in the factory now and who should he listen to. "Have you sent the goods to GFN Electronics?" "Not yet." "Why didn't it ship?" Manager Ma said to hold back for a few days. "It will be loaded and shipped today." "Manager Ma has quit. I am now the person in charge of this factory. Please change the name of the factory for me." This. He was also very embarrassed. Lu Feng said blankly that he was the person in charge. Now the situation is very chaotic. Mr. Hu was arrested and Mr. Ma quit his job. Everyone was worried about wages. "Can you post?" "What is this?" Lu Feng said in a deep voice. "I will officially inform you now that Tianying Copper will be returned to the holding company of GFN Electronics, and a few managers will be parachuted in the next few days. Everything will be business as usual." "Then ship it first," the supervisor thought to himself. Mr. Ma stopped working. Anyway, according to the contract, the last time was 3 days later. The factory is not big, and after walking around in an hour, Lu Feng felt that he had to go back quickly to find someone to take over, otherwise people would really be in chaos. After 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Lu Feng drove back, and by 6 o'clock he was almost back. Outside the production workshop, there were about 20 young people standing, and in front stood a man in his 30s, with a beard, holding a folder in his hand, quite the temperament of a small leader. "Stand up," the man shouted. More than 20 people straightened up, and there were still murmurs in the crowd. "You know, our group was scolded by the quality inspection in the afternoon and fined 20 yuan. It's not our fault. Why are you calling us out to stand here?" "Who? Can anyone? I'm a newcomer a few days ago. I'm clumsy. I installed a diode on the assembly line wrong. One of them caught fire when it was powered on and tested. If the diode is installed incorrectly, it will catch fire. Damn, the insurance is also wrong." "What are you talking about? The chat is so lively. Come and come, you stand with me and say." The man picked up the blue folder in his hand and pointed at the crowd. "Stand with me and say, stand up, damn it. It's a dog, right? It tickles without being scolded for a day. A cheap bone." No one spoke at the scene. In the afternoon, the person responsible for installing insurance will stand up for Lao Tzu, the man asked with a grim look on his face. No one stood up. "Niujiyi," the man put his hands on his back, stared at a thin girl and said, "Is your workstation equipped with insurance?" The little girl named Niujiyi glanced left and right, and said very aggrieved, "I went to the toilet in the afternoon and asked Gao's Haiqiang to replace it. When he came back, he said that it was easier to install insurance than diodes, so he replaced it with me." As soon as Lu Feng came back, he parked the car. When passing by, he saw the workshop team meeting, so he stopped to take a look, stood there and twisted his waist. Driving for 2 hours in a row, the young man's waist couldn't stand it. "Don't talk about Gao's Haiqiang, just talk about your business. Let me tell you, this time, I will scrap a set of machines. Fortunately, I didn't connect the display screen to test. Otherwise, can you afford it?" The supervisor stared at the little girl and shouted, "This is a major accident, get me out of my bed, no salary." The little girl cried on the spot in a hurry. She worked hard for almost a month, and she was about to be paid, so she was fired. "It's not really my fault, I didn't pretend it was Gao's Haiqiang." "What are you pushing on me?" A tall man with pimples all over his face said arrogantly, "It's you who pretended to be. I often make mistakes, but it's really not me today." A group of people in the back had already fried the pot, whispering and talking endlessly. Lu Feng stood by and watched. The little girl cried and emptied her eyes and started to sob. "Isn't this slander? Everyone said that I went to the toilet in the afternoon to change positions. Why didn't I listen to the explanation? Lu Feng stood there and twisted his waist to speak. High-speed text handwriting returns to the 1989 chapter list. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 303. The little supervisor glanced at Lu Feng. His hair was colorful, he was young, and he was probably an employee of another production group, so he ignored him. He said to Niu Jiyi, "Go to the personnel department to go through the formalities, or if you leave, I will help you with the formalities." Niu Jiyi stood there dumbfounded like a log, her eyes were red from crying, and she didn't know what to do except at a loss. The crowd murmured again, and many people expressed their dissatisfaction. Niu Jiyi has the fastest hands and feet in our group, and opened her up. If the assembly line were to speed up, who would be busy? That's right, Gao's Haiqiang has only been here for a few days, because he is the supervisor's cousin. If Niu Jiyi leaves, I'll stop working after receiving this month's salary. Maybe one day I'll have to blame him. Gao's Haiqiang listened to the accusations behind him, and turned his head away from embarrassment. With a burly body of about 1.8 meters and a face with little experience, he raised his hand and pointed at everyone arrogantly. "Shut up, Laozi, do you want to do it? If you don't want to do it, get out of here. The most important thing under my brother's hand is people, you know." The supervisor stood with his arms folded in front of his chest, staring coldly at everything on the scene. "It's your problem, now you can get out," Gao's Haiqiang said towards Niu Jiyi. Niu Jiyi was a little tired from crying, and sobbed, "Is it because I didn't get along with you, so I deliberately harassed me? The salary will be paid in less than 5 days. Gao's Haiqiang was also straightforward, stood up and stared at Niu Jiyi and said, "I told you, you won't suffer a loss if you follow me. If you don't eat and drink a toast, don't blame me." Watching the scene unfold, Lu Feng took a deep breath. He knew a word called mutual harm at the bottom. For people with higher positions or social status than him, they tend to be submissive, but to those who are at the bottom like himself, the person who strikes is particularly ruthless. As the saying goes, the king of hell is good at seeing little devils and difficult to deal with. Lu Feng was quite familiar with the internal management rules of the company, so he couldn't help but say, "Little girl, don't cry, you can go to the personnel department to file a complaint, not if they want to be fired, as long as you meet the business assessment standards, no problem." The design of this system was originally designed to prevent the decentralization of power and lead to the abuse of power by the people below, which can be regarded as a check and balance. The supervisor's face is not good. He didn't want ordinary employees to know the existence of this system, so he said solemnly, "Who are you? Which group are you from? What are you doing standing here in our group meeting? I want to stand here and stand here, this is not your home." Lu Feng looked at him and said, "If there is a problem, you should find the specific person, instead of getting off work and pulling this group of people in. This scolding is endless, you are forcing the little girl to have a partner with you." Lu Feng's aura was still there. Standing there and talking to the two of them, none of the people present dared to speak. The problem was that the colors on his head were so colorful that they didn't look high. Although Gao's Haiqiang has not been here for a long time, he is very arrogant and domineering because his cousin is a small leader, and his purpose of coming to the factory is very clear, that is, to find a wife. "What does it have to do with you? Let me tell you, get out of my way as soon as possible, you know. It doesn't matter whether I get out or not, I have to let employees know that there is such a channel." The little supervisor was getting impatient. He pointed at Lu Feng with the folder in his hand and asked, "Which group are you from? What's your supervisor's name? Is this important?" We are talking about something now, Lu Feng said to the two of them. 3 or 5 groups of people came out of the factory. Just now, 3 or 5 groups of people walked past. Some stopped to take a look, and some left directly, not wanting to cause trouble. Dude, buddy, it has nothing to do with you, don't make trouble. Let's go. It's not your object, you care so much. A kind person next to him stretched out his hand and pulled Lu Feng's arm, telling him not to take care of him blindly. There are more than 10,000 people in the various departments of the factory, and people come and go every day. Just take care of yourself. Don't pull me. Lu Feng pulled the hand that was holding him away, and said solemnly, I'll take care of this today, don't pull me. The few people who pulled him didn't stop him, and stood aside to watch the excitement. Young people think they can do it. I'm afraid that I feel like I'm not even drawing a knife to help Lu Jian, but I don't know that I don't even count as a rude hare. That's right, what qualifications do you have to take care of others here? It's normal. They're all young people. Some just came out of school. Didn't the 2 dormitories fight a few days ago? Lu Feng looked at the girl named Niu Jiyi and said, don't cry, I'll take you to the personnel department. Wait, who are you under? The little supervisor asked. None of that matter. My brother asked you something, Gao's Haiqiang shouted angrily. Go to the personnel department, Lu Feng said towards Niu Jiyi. It's useless to go anywhere. I said she did it, and she did it. I tell you, don't get involved, and be careful that your salary is gone. The supervisor spoke to Lu Feng with a full voice. It smells like a threat. You said it's useless, isn't it? Lu Feng insisted on going to the personnel department. There were already 3 floors and 3 floors outside. Before we could leave, a man in his 30s pushed aside the crowd and asked, what are you doing? What about a fight? Mr. Liao is here. It's over, it's a big deal. Why is Mr. Liao here? Mr. Liao? Lu Feng glanced at the man. He didn't know him. Since he's already in charge, Hao Lai is also a person. He asked, which department do you belong to? What the hell do you care about my department? What did you do? We got into a fight. The man saw Lu Feng's unpleasant expression, and shouted loudly, if there will be another fight in the future, if there is no salary, I will blast you out on the same day, do you know? There was no fight. It was this girl who wanted to file a complaint with the personnel department. During the delivery in the afternoon, an insurance policy was installed incorrectly, and the whole machine was scrapped. The girl said it wasn't her who did it. That's all. Lu Feng, his tone was flat. This has something to do with you. Get out of here. If you have any objection to the decision of the supervisors at all levels, you can appeal to the personnel department. The power is not in the hands of the supervisors at all levels. They have the right to report. Lu Feng asked him, you are the deputy of the personnel department. Total. Mr. Liao stood there and sorted out his wrinkled suits. If he were the vice president, he would have been awesome. He is just a supervisor in charge of a production plant. There are many people here, and there are many people interviewing. There is a lot of pressure every month, so the work is relatively rough. Don't worry about me. Why are you talking so much? Are you finished? It's over. Get out when you're done. Mr. Liao thought for a moment and asked, which department? What's its name? My name is Lu Feng. The department's word is not available for the time being. No department? Are you from our factory? Mr. Liao stood there and said to the person behind him, go and find the security guard. It's not about my identity, it's about her, Lu Feng said solemnly. Just to check your identity, why? Run into the factory to give the little guy a head start. Mr. Liao shouted sharply, do you know him? Go to the personnel department and ask me, which department has a person named Lu Feng? The setting sun on the horizon stretched the figure very long. The place was already surrounded by water, and the people outside jumped up to look inside. When the security guard arrived, they couldn't squeeze in. "The security is here, everyone." President Liao said to the security guard, "Recognize this person, when did he sneak in?" The security guards were also confused when they saw Lu Feng. He hadn't seen such a person in the last few days, and he had no impression at all. Lu Feng was driving in and out. These security guards recognized the license plates. As for who was sitting in the car, they had no idea. "No impression," the security guard shouted at Lu Feng, "Where are you from?" "The problem now is not my identity, but this problem." Lu Feng stretched out his hand and patted Niu Jiyi's shoulder. "Digression, do you know?" I humming asked which department you belong to. "If you don't belong to the factory, get out of here." Gao's Haiqiang and the little supervisor were originally worried that Lu Feng was a person, because most people don't mind their own business, but now it seems that they think too much. Niu Jiyi didn't expect things to be so big. This is already the situation for him. "Don't drag him down." He pulled Lu Feng's arm and whispered, "Thank you, forget it, Mr. Liao is here." It can't be counted. Lu Feng was a little dissatisfied with the bottom management of the company, and sighed, "Don't you want to check my identity? Go and call the general manager of your department." "You don't have a small tone, general manager? Are you worthy of it?" Gao's Haiqiang sneered and said, "Go away, lest the security guards clean you up, you know." The security guards no longer want to write more ink, and there are more and more people around. A few days ago, there was a fight in the dormitory. They ignored it and were criticized. The two of them stretched out their hands to support Lu Feng and were about to drag them out. The deputy director of the personnel department passed by. Seeing so many people, after hearing it, he seemed to have something to do with the personnel department. People. When Mr. Liao looked back, he saw Director Zhu's head shortened instantly. With a smile on his face, he said, "Mr. Zhu, why are you here? It's not a big deal. Anyone fighting again?" No, it's just that someone sneaked in to have sex with the female employee, and stood up for her, but didn't fight. I can't see the gate of this factory. Who am I to see?" Mr. Zhu was a little unhappy, and something happened every 3 days. The people around were no longer chattering, and everyone's eyes were focused on Mr. Zhu. He wore such a light blue suit and stood there so domineering, he was definitely the existence of a great leader. At this time, even Gao's Haiqiang and his cousin were standing aside and laughing with them. Although they laughed stiffly, the big people who appeared were beyond their usual range of contact. As everyone knows, the next second is the real dimensionality reduction blow. High-speed text handwriting returns to the 1989 chapter list. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 304. The security released Lu Feng's arm, and Lu Feng moved a bit. Under the golden sunset, his hair was covered with a golden light, and he stared at President Zhu. This person, Lu Feng, knows that he sits at the back every time a high-level meeting is held. He has eaten twice. Don't look at the meeting hosted by Lu Feng, who is extremely humble and bows his head. These ordinary assembly line workers are in front of him. In his eyes, he is definitely an untouchable leader. Mr. Zhu glanced up and down at Lu Feng, mainly looking at his hair, while scanning Lu Feng's face. He said, "Where are you from, and, Lu?" Mr. Zhu felt that something was not right, and his voice was a little softer. "What's your name?" "Lu Feng," Lu Feng said with a cold face. Lu, President Lu." Mr. Zhu's voice trembled a bit. He stared at Lu Feng for a few more times, and he was sure that it was him. His hair was just dyed in a mess, and he said in a panic, "Aren't you on a business trip abroad? Why? What's wrong?" Lu Feng looked at him and said, "Don't you want to confirm my identity first? Have you confirmed it now?" Mr. Zhu was stupid. He thought he was just taking care of the fights of ordinary employees. How did he hit Mr. Lu's gun? The whole person stayed on the spot, and the cold sweat on the back came out layer by layer. At this time, Mr. Zhu was like an ordinary employee who made a mistake and saw him. In Lu Feng's eyes, he was barely considered a senior executive. Confirmed, Mr. Zhu said in a low voice. Gao's Haiqiang and several people felt that something was not right. Why did Mr. Zhu suddenly wilt? In their eyes, it is impossible to imagine the identity of the person who can make Mr. Zhu so fearful. Is this man a boss? Looking at Mr. Zhu, he looks like a boss. I've never seen such a boss before. His hair is more colorful than mine. Maybe it's a related household, barely suppressing Mr. Zhu. The people around were chatting endlessly. The last glimpse of the setting sun was already hidden on the other side of the mountain. The street lights in the factory turned on. Lu Feng asked Mr. Zhu, "Did you talk about the employee complaint channel?" I said it at the meeting." Lu Feng turned his head and asked Niu Jiyi, "Did I tell you about a meeting?" Niu Jiyi shook her head. At this moment, she stared at Lu Feng with wide eyes, wondering what the identity of this person was, but looking at the tone of his speech, it was definitely not an ordinary person. Lu Feng looked at the little supervisor again and asked, "Have you had a meeting?" The little supervisor was dumbfounded. The boss above said that he had held a meeting for himself, and the person below said that he had never held a meeting, and the responsibility was all his own. He dared to pass the responsibility to his immediate boss, workshop director and general manager of the production plant. Such a person? Me. He is a mute who eats Wang Lian, and he can't tell if he suffers. What are you? You said it, you didn't say it, you didn't say it. As soon as the little supervisor gritted his teeth, the dead Taoist friend was not dead, and said, "I didn't say it." You, Mr. Zhu's eyes widened, but he didn't expect that a small workshop supervisor would dare to make himself guilty. "Call me the person in charge of the production department, as well as all the people in charge from top to bottom," Lu Feng instructed the security guards around him. Whoa! When the words came out, the audience was in an uproar. What tone is this? All responsible persons from top to bottom, all present? At GFN Electronics, people who dare to say such things should not have more than one hand. Zhang is always a woman. Everyone knows that Mr. Zhu runs the market outside. The three newly appointed vice presidents are not too young. Some well-informed people have already guessed what, seeing Lu Feng's face full of shock, staring at the young man in disbelief. Niu Jiyi looked at him dumbfounded, and said dumbly, "I think I can leave without the salary." Lu Feng reached out and patted her shoulder, "Don't worry." The little supervisor's face was a little bitter. It was already in this situation, and he must have kicked the iron plate. Now it depends on how big Lu Feng is and how to deal with himself. "Brother, what should I do?" Gao's Haiqiang asked in a low voice. To shut up. The first person to run over was the general manager of the production department, a bald man in his 50s. He ran in a hurry because the security guard told him that a man named Lu Feng was standing at the door of the factory building, surrounded by a group of people. If Lu Feng wants to visit the production, he will definitely let him know. This group of people is accompanying him. Now is an emergency, how can he not be in a hurry? Mr. Lu, the general manager of the production department, squinted at Lu Feng's colorful hair and said, "When did you come back?" "Just got back an hour or two." The employees at the scene had already surrounded nearly 1,000 people. When they saw that such a big man as the general manager of the production department called out to President Lu so humbly in front of Lu Feng, the crowd became restless. The little supervisor felt a little dark in front of his eyes. Judging from the general manager of the production department, Mr. Lu said that he was absolutely abolished, and he was completely abolished. Let's go, security, let the people disperse and protect the safety of President Lu." A burly man came over, directed the security to disperse the crowd, turned his head to look at Lu Feng and smiled humbly, "President Lu, it is good. The general manager of the personnel department is also here." Deputy Director Zhu glanced at him quietly, lowered his head and said nothing. Niu Jiyi was extremely nervous in her hands. On weekdays, she was afraid to see these characters. "Don't say a word." People looked at her more, for fear that she would not behave well and be punished. However, these people are now standing here as well behaved as children. 4 or 5 people came one after another, all of whom were heads of departments at all levels. Half of the crowd had been dispersed, but they didn't leave. They just stood in the distance and continued to chat and watch the excitement. "President Zhang is here. My God, President Zhang actually came. Who is this man with colorful hair?" Zhang Fengxia was wearing high-heeled shoes on her feet, wearing a delicate business attire and light makeup. Today is extraordinarily atmospheric. She just attended a business party and returned less than half an hour. Next to him was a girl, a newly promoted assistant. "Mr. Zhang, please slow down." Zhang Fengxia pushed aside the crowd and saw that the heads of various departments were there, but she didn't see Lu Feng, and asked, "Isn't Mr. Lu back?" "I'm here," Lu Feng said helplessly. Zhang Fengxia was dumbfounded when she looked at the colorful thing she was talking about. She tiptoed up to take a look, and found that it was indeed Lu Feng, and asked, "What can't you think about after you go there?" "Let's not talk about hair now, I'll hold a meeting for you here," Lu Feng stood up and said. Seeing his serious face, Zhang Fengxia hurriedly returned to her normal form, standing aside and asked a few people, "What happened? Gather so many people. Is it a problem with the production department, or a problem of nepotism, or a problem with the complaint channel for ordinary employees?" The day before I left, I talked about this problem at a meeting. Decentralization will lead to the fact that a small supervisor can control the life and death of a group of ordinary employees. So there must be checks and balances. The personnel department completely treats this as a fart. Lu Feng looked around, all the bosses were standing there and didn't dare to look at him. This little girl, just because she didn't agree to deal with the supervisor's younger brother, was dealt with today, and she only had a few days to pay her salary, but she was told that she didn't have a penny, and the finance department would definitely pay the money. Then where did the money go? Lu Feng said solemnly. How many of these situations are there? Internal management must not only have top-down efficiency, but also a bottom-to-top feedback mechanism. This kind of feedback in the market is very important, but the internal management of enterprises is even more important, otherwise it will be unilaterally exerting pressure on employees. Don't underestimate the problem of one employee. If one employee is dissatisfied today, there may be 100 or 1,000 employees dissatisfied tomorrow. The management is extremely poor, Lu Feng said to Zhang Fengxia. Don't you often ask Gao Jiwei for advice? It seems that he has a hand. Zhang Fengxia stood there with an embarrassed expression, and said, I will review it. Recently, I have quickly sorted out the management and improved this aspect. We are a large-scale enterprise, not a small factory. Large-scale enterprises have a standard, that is, standardized management, but in terms of bottom-level governance, it is still the practice of a local emperor. A supervisor said that if employees leave, they will leave, and the personnel department will be required. What are you doing? Lu Feng said to the general manager of the personnel department. Is the door the place for a summary meeting? Our rule is that after completing the work, the supervisor will stand in line beside the post, hold a discussion meeting, and make meeting minutes, the general manager said, wiping the sweat from his forehead. That's all, I'll talk about it tomorrow morning after finishing speaking, Lu Feng said to Niu Jiyi. Don't worry, you're fine. Niu Jiyi froze on the spot, just looking at Lu Feng. She couldn't believe that the person in front of her was the boss. Lu Feng patted her on the shoulder and walked towards the cafeteria. The ordinary employees on both sides hurriedly made way for a wide road. This was the first time they knew who the boss was always. Zhang Fengxia looked at the people present, and said to the general manager of the production department, "This time I was caught by President Liu. I used to have a lot of reasons in front of me. I didn't say it just now, that is, I am easy to talk, right? For the reason, he dared to let you go, I was scolded, I don't want to say more, and the summary meeting will be held at 8 o'clock in the evening." Zhang Fengxia finished speaking and left. The general manager of the production department and the general manager of the personnel department, with black faces, each scolded their own people, one level over another. The general manager of the production department scolded the workshop director for a while. After scolding, he was not relieved. He looked at the little supervisor and Gao's Haiqiang, and shouted, "Just the two of you? It's on the chairman's face, why don't you two go? What about death?" The little supervisor's face was filled with 2 words of frustration. At this time, he really wanted to cry without tears. This was not a kick to an iron plate, but a kick to the top of a mountain. "I will now officially inform you both that you have been fired, and I will go to the personnel department to go through the formalities in a while, and leave me overnight." High-speed text handwriting returns to the 1989 chapter list. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 305. Supervisors at all levels left the scene one after another, but the ordinary employees on the scene had not yet left. Everyone who was watching this lively today was stunned. For the first time, they knew that the boss was so young. And, that hair, tasteful. My God, the chairman is so young. I feel younger than President Zhang. I'm going to dye that hair. In the single room in the cafeteria, Lu Feng was eating with an expressionless face. The door was pushed open, Zhang Fengxia walked in, sat opposite, and stared at him for more than 10 seconds. "Don't be stern, your old man has approved me in front of the entire company, why didn't you say it in advance when you came back, and made a surprise attack?" Zhang Fengxia put the bag in her hand aside and said, "Internal management, it needs to be perfected slowly, and I will go to the meeting and talk about it in a while." "Yeah," Lu Feng replied in a muffled voice. "What's the matter with your hair?" "It's over there. It's done. I'll send a few capable people to take over tomorrow to restore order as soon as possible." "My hair is dyed." Lu Feng stared at the dish in front of him and took a bite. Zhang Fengxia sat there and rolled her eyes. This man wouldn't look at himself at all. "Why did you dress up so well?" Lu Feng asked. "Date with a man," Zhang Fengxia said angrily, "a particularly handsome man." "Really?" Lu Feng raised his head and said with a smile, "Congratulations." "Congratulations. Don't you understand what I'm saying?" Zhang Fengxia leaned back on the chair and sighed, "I attended a banquet and I just came back, but you scolded me in the face. If you don't do well, you will be scolded." "How is the situation on Mr. Zhu's side?" Lu Feng put down the tableware and wiped his mouth and asked. "I don't want to ask about his affairs. I don't care about anything except administrative work." "You are right, he is really aggressive, but he has met his opponent this time and hasn't come back yet." Zhang Fengxia's expression changed. "It's not good looking. Obviously, I didn't get along well with Zhu Lidong during this time." Lu Feng was not surprised either. The internal management seeks stability, while the external market is more aggressive. Of course, the market side hopes that the entire company will be responsible for the market terminal and become the rear of the marketing department. His relationship with the finance department was even worse. One of the vice presidents under his command went to the finance general manager to quarrel and almost got into a fight. The person in charge of the budget department called me to cry, and the heads of the advertising department and the commercial department also called me several times. "He doesn't have the final say in the company," Zhang Fengxia said angrily. "If you increase the advertising budget, you will increase it, so what do you want the chairman to do?" Lu Feng didn't say anything. This kind of internal competition is normal. Under the current management model, the pull between various departments will always exist. It's been so long, and the market over there has not yet been developed. It seems that this time it is indeed a difficult thing. Lu Feng asked about the company's recent affairs again, nodded and said, "Find a few local newspapers to publicize our acquisition of Tianying Copper, and I will take care of Mr. Zhu's affairs." "Okay, I can't take care of others, you are very tired driving back, right?" "Rest early." Zhang Fengxia stood up and said, "I have to go to a meeting. By the way, your hair." Lu Feng reached out and touched his hair, and said, "I'm going to dye it black tomorrow." Today, Lu Feng was extremely tired. He went back to the office to read some reports, took a shower, and called Zhang Xiaoyan to tell her that he had returned. "I originally thought of going back in early April, but now it seems that I have to wait until the midsummer." Before 10 o'clock, Lu Feng had already fallen asleep. In the municipal office, Huang Yowei stood in front of the desk and looked at the flag placed on his desk, but there was not much expression on his face. Secretary Kui stood aside and reminded in a low voice, "It's time for you to rest. You have less than 6 hours of sleep these days. Can't sleep, this year is a critical year. You are working too hard. Isn't this what I should do? Living here, I feel like I'm on the ground. He has passed the first test, and I can't help him later." Huang Yowei opened the drawer, took out a pack of cigarettes, lit one, and leaned on the desk. "Shouldn't I put my hopes on me? We have enough evidence. Now we can arrest the people from Hokan Copper Industry," Secretary Kui said. "Then what? Is the market coming out?" Huang Yowei knocked on the ash and said, "If a new order cannot be established, then the old order is the best order, and their interest chain needs to be completely interrupted, otherwise there are so many companies. Pressing one piece, there will be a second, a third." Secretary Kui stood aside and did not speak. "I wish him good luck, briefly summarize the situation over there, invite him to dinner tomorrow, and explain." Huang Yowei twisted out the cigarette butt and walked out towards the door. In the office building, most of Hokan Copper's offices have turned off the lights, only the chairman's office is still lit. Li Yelong is sitting there, Mr. Li smokes one after another, and the room is already filled with smoke. "Dad, shouldn't the situation be that bad?" Li Yelong raised his head and asked. "It's worse than you believe. In Shandong and Hebei provinces, Wiaputa's market share has begun to grow at a faster pace recently, and it has become a match for local companies. The decline in their market share will directly affect us." Mr. Li sighed. Taking a breath, some exclaimed, "The speed is too fast. Vipta's market promotion is indeed very fast, and the volume is 3 times that of Onfan's high-end TV. This Lu Feng is really a sharp sword of Huang Yowei. None of the 10 Jiao Onfans are Lu Feng's opponents. I think they can only send their hopes to Sichuan to bring down Lu Feng. I have already contacted Hire and he sends, and a more brutal competition is about to begin." There was a fierce light in his eyes, and he said, "The cash flow in his hand can't last this wave. Jumping up and down for so long, he can be considered a character." Li Yelong said proudly, "After all, he is a cannon fodder, not worthy of being on the same level as me." President Li glanced at his son, sighed in his heart, and was slightly disappointed. Although Li Yelong was cynical on the surface, he was still capable, but he overestimated himself. If Li Yelong had 1/3 of Lu Feng's skills, he would have retired. The next day, as several newspapers published the successful acquisition of Tianying Copper by Jiafeng Electronics, which caused another earthquake in the local business community. Many people thought that the previous battle was over, but they did not know that it had just begun. Everyone looked at the newspaper and noticed a flaming smell. The content of these headlines was similar, and it could be seen at a glance that Jiafeng Electronics provided the copywriting, and these newspapers were only responsible for publishing. One of the paragraphs is very important. which reads, GFN Electronics is based on the electronics industry, looking at the entire industry chain, and will carry out more exploration in the upstream and downstream industries. We have enough confidence and ability to walk out of an unstoppable path. The road, since the birth of the Weaputa brand, has been widely welcomed by the market. The acquisition of Tianying Copper is an important step in the company's strategic planning, but it is by no means rushing towards the copper industry. We accept goodwill cooperation from any company. If no one is willing to cooperate, we can also be self-sufficient. In the future corporate planning, GFN Electronics will develop more industrial facilities, and at the same time plan to share the industrial chain with more small and medium-sized enterprises in the future. Many companies in the local chambers of commerce and copper industry associations were a little dumbfounded when they saw this sentence. What is Lufeng doing? Looking at the meaning of the sentence, I want to form a gang and set up a dragon gate with Hokan Copper. Lufeng went to bed early last night and woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning. He held a morning meeting in the morning. He repeated yesterday's question at the meeting and asked about the recent sales in the market. With the opening of the market in the two provinces, the daily sales volume has soared from about 1,000 units to the current 3,000 units. The production capacity of this factory has reached the end. At this rate, it is not a big problem to sell 1 million units a year. The problem is that the profit is low. The profit of selling 1 unit in Jiangsu province is about 100 to 200 yuan. In the remaining two provinces, the profit is infinitely close to zero, and the loss is too great. The atmosphere in the conference room was a little heavy. Everyone was happy with such a high market share, but they sold a lot and made no money. This is a problem. This factory is a money-burning machine, and it has to lose tens of thousands to dozens of dollars every day. Never wait. Mr. Liu, I think the top priority now is to solve the problem of profitability. We must launch a profitable product, the general manager of finance said with a serious face. How much money is there on the account? 21.76 million. If the market remains unchanged, the money can be burned for 2 years. The answer given by Mr. Zhu is that the money may be burned within the last month. Lufeng raised his brows when he heard Zhu Lidong's judgment, burn 20 million a month. What a terrifying competition for money. The most terrifying subsidy battle he has ever seen is Ali and Penguin's smashing of money on taxi software, burning 100 million a day. The current 20 million is enough to compare with more than 10 billion, or even 2 billion in later generations. Lufeng took a deep breath and said, the 1991 year is really a special juncture. Don't think about making a profit first. Which big company will make a profit as soon as it starts? If a big company wants to get rid of losses in the short term, it must be greeted by death, isn't it just burning money? But I want to see how much money the leaders of these state-owned enterprises dare to burn with me. No one spoke at the scene. The entire senior management had always disagreed with Lufeng's plan, but he did not say to his face that there were many executives from former state-owned enterprises. Their idea is that playing with state-owned enterprises and making money by hitching a ride will not only make more money, but also have no risks. It is indeed easy to make money by riding a state-owned enterprise. The question is, how many years will it be? All that die are hitchhikers. Didn't you say there is the latest market report? Lufeng asked the person in the marketing department. It's not our data, the country's data survey on home appliances, and last year's GDP growth data came out. High-speed text handwriting returns to the 1989 chapter list. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 306. Lufeng did not expect that some people are already making market data tables. When it comes to corporate data, it has already started at the national level. He couldn't help but ask, "Who asked you to do this reference?" President Zhu ordered. He said that this data is very instructive for the market. Okay, keep talking. Last year, the GDP growth rate was 3.84%, and the per capita income was 168 yuan, of which the per capita income of the first-tier cities was 432 yuan. The gap is very large, and the number of TV owners, from 3.75 units per 100 households in the late 1980s to 12.63 units per 100 households at the end of last year. In 2 years, it has more than tripled. According to the latest data from the Bureau of Statistics, the GDP growth rate in the first quarter of this year has exceeded that of last year. Banks have become active again, and they have begun to increase investment and lending. Therefore, the severe compression of GDP is due to the contraction of funds. This report says that the investment promotion projects in various places are chaotic, and there are many people who are nourishing large rats, taking out loans, and picking wool. The sudden contraction is because of a guy who runs all over the country and picks wool everywhere. Cough cough cough, Lu Feng coughed. Zhang Fengxia glanced at him with a half smile but not a smile, and said, "Skip this paragraph, and focus on the point. In the past few years, a large number of bank loans have led to severe inflation. In the past 2 years, wages have doubled, but prices have also risen sharply. It can be seen from the above that a large number of loans will be offered to enterprises in the next few years to stimulate employment and the economy. Many economists say that the money will be fed back to the home appliance industry. Especially color TVs, refrigerators, air conditioners, and electric fans. In big cities, refrigerators and air conditioners have higher growth rates, while color TVs have higher growth rates in small cities, towns, and rural areas. The forecast given this year shows that the overall TV market is likely to reach an astonishing market of 15 million sets, and we are expected to occupy 1/15 of the market this year. And now the main body of the market is Changhong. At present, Changhong's market share in the country is 32.97%, that is to say, for every 3 TV sets sold, 1 is Changhong. It can be seen from these reports that the big environment is getting better, and color TV will usher in a blowout this year. Our popularity in the market is mainly due to low prices. Now the price competition in the terminal market is particularly fierce, and the entire market is in expanding, wages are going up, TV prices are going down. The predicted GDP data for this year will not be lower than 7%. According to this growth data, people will have more and more money in their pockets, and TV opportunities will become more and more popular. Mr. Lu, this is a rough idea of what we have done. Report. Lu Feng sat there and gestured with his eyes. He listened to the data just now and recalled a lot of things in his mind. If he remembered correctly, the GDP growth rate in 1991 was 9.2%, and throughout the 1990s, there was no rate lower than 7%. At that time, the TV market was not 15 million units, but 20 million units. He remembered one data very clearly. In 1992, the domestic color TV market alone exceeded 20 million units. The major manufacturers started a price reduction war. Changhong was the best in the industry, and it was the industry leader until the early 2000 years. 1/15, Lu Feng glanced at everyone present and said, "I did say the goal of selling 1 million units per year. For an electronics company that is not a state-owned enterprise, it is really good to have such results. The problem is if you are motivated, this year's goal is set at 1.5 million, how about it?" There was sparse applause at the scene, and Lu Feng could see that the people in the marketing department were not very happy. If the target of 1 million units is achieved, the year-end bonus will remain the same. If the target of 1.5 million units is completed, the year-end bonus will be doubled, Lu Feng said. As soon as these words came out, several vice presidents of the marketing department hurriedly clapped their hands with excitement on their faces. It was not that the task could not be completed, but that the money was not enough. After the morning meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning, Lu Feng went directly to the cafeteria to eat. Zhang Fengxia sat down beside Lu Feng with a bowl of noodles and said, "I can see that you are very confident in the industry. It's not confidence in the industry, but confidence in the country. The domestic environment will get better and better, the economy will soar, the industry will upgrade, and domestic consumption will also upgrade," Lu Feng said while drinking porridge. "Of course it's good to have a broad market, but there's also a lot of competition, not only state-owned enterprises, but also foreign companies. If we can't make a profit, we will really be dragged down," Zhang Fengxia said nervously. "Lend if you can, and raise money if you can't. God can't starve to death." "This is not something you should consider," Lu Feng said with a sullen head. "If you can't get the money, go to cheat." Lu Feng rolled her eyes at her and ignored her. There was a knock on the door, and Zhang Fengxia said, "Come in." A waiter walked in, looked at Zhang Fengxia a little scared, and said timidly, "Someone is looking for it." "Who?" Secretary Kui walked in, saw Zhang Fengxia smiling and said, "Mr. Zhang is so pretty again, is Mr. Lu eating?" Lu Feng glanced at him, stunned, and said, "Secretary Kui? Rare guest, why are you here?" "I'm here to pick you up for breakfast in the office. It seems that I'm a step late." "You look like you're almost full," Secretary Kui said with a smile. "Sit down and eat something," Lu Feng said politely. Secretary Kui was not polite. He sat down and took a pair of chopsticks. He said to the waiter, "Bring me a bowl of knife-cut noodles, a tea egg, and a side dish. If you have meat and cold dishes, come." Lu Feng was full, wiped his mouth, looked at the large and small plates in front of him, and said, "It's just different from us businessmen, eating noodles is so pompous." "Mr. Lu is joking. How can I compare to you? Listen to my cousin, you don't give people money, you give them a bunch of TV sets." "Yes, I'm not looking at your face. I thought about giving more money, but after thinking about it again, it will definitely not work. If he takes it, it is equivalent to bribing you. The problem is that I want to give more." Lu Feng smiled and said, "How smart I am, I gave him 1.5 million worth of goods, you don't have to thank me, it is not easy for you to be busy." Secretary Kui originally wanted to find fault and ask him, but now he is speechless because of his choking. Originally, his cousin suffered a loss, and he made him speak as if he was taking advantage of him. She didn't say a word for a long time, and ate the noodles with her head down. Lu Feng sat there and watched him finish his meal, and asked, "Mr. Huang is looking for me." "I didn't say it all, I'll find you for breakfast, let's go." Secretary Kui stood up and walked directly to the door. Zhang Fengxia couldn't understand what happened, looked at Lu Feng and asked, "What's the matter? Offended him?" "How can I offend him? It's nothing, I'm busy with you." Secretary Kui came by car, got in the car and went straight to the breakfast stall. Huang Yue thought about having breakfast and chatting with Lu Feng, but the tofu brain in front of him was getting cold, and he didn't see anyone, so he looked a little unhappy. The car stopped, Lu Feng got out of the car, saw Huang Yue sitting on a small bench by the roadside, he hurried over and said, "Why are you eating here? Why did you come here?" Secretary Kui said first, "I'm going." President Lu happened to be having breakfast. He said that he would come back after eating, and it was delayed. Huang Yue frowned and said, "Lu has always been rich and powerful. If I leave an unimportant person on the side of the road, what kind of luxurious breakfast does President Lu have for breakfast? Xiaolongbao. Your xiaolongbao is estimated to cost 30 to 50 yuan apiece, right?" Huang Yue said after digging some leek flowers for himself and smearing them on the tofu brain. "Secretary Kui has an opinion on me. Isn't it possible? Someone's relatives introduced you to the relationship, How long did you delay the money? You still took the money, he won't punish you. Who is he? Huan Yue said angrily. No trader, no businessman, you are a bit treacherous. Pass. It's really easy to earn more than 1 million yuan. He introduced you to me. Let's not talk about how much he played in the acquisition of the electronics factory project. If I don't know you, I will give the money. If you don't talk about this, you're in trouble, you know. Huan Yue picked up a fried dough stick and took a bite. In what way? I have trouble every day. Sichuan, I have news that Changhong is going to kill you. You can't develop the market over there. Your CEO is in the middle of it. According to a friend of mine, a new company has been established over there. Patents, brand names, and there are pressures in the market. The latest market competition will come in a month at most. Lu Feng looked at him. How does this old boy know more than he does? You're more of a businessman than I am. I was originally a businessman. Before this, I have been staying in major state-owned enterprises. Business is my original business. Pay more attention. I don't think you can resist this wave. If you don't have enough cash, you can delay it. Crush you. How to drag it down? I heard that means that a middleman will take the lead, bring Weaputa and Changhong together, share sales channels, and set up a new company. If you want to sell, put more than 10 million in it. Lu Feng nodded slightly and said, shared sales channels are just a bait. I just want to put my cash flow of more than 10 million into it, and then a wave of price cuts in the terminal market. I have to cut the price with my teeth, or it will be scrapped. Already? That's right, Ruzai can be taught, and chatting with you is very clear. Huan Yue picked up a chopstick of pickles and put it in his mouth, chewing crunchily, and said, this is not a conspiracy, this is a conspiracy. Zhu Lidong didn't dare to drill, and he wasn't willing to leave the market over there, so he kept going around. Lu Feng instantly wanted to understand where he was stuck. The person under your command understands the market and the overall situation. My suggestion is to keep it for now. If you can stabilize the 3 provinces this year, you will win. Huan Yue stared at Lu Feng and said. Lu Feng smiled bitterly and said, you know the answer, you're still making fun of me here. High-speed text handwriting returns to the 1989 chapter list. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 307. Huan Yue pondered for a while and laughed, then shook his head and said, I don't know whether to say that your life is good or bad. If it was a few years ago, both the market and state-owned enterprises can accommodate you. You can tolerate me too. Lu Feng looked at him and asked with a smile. Huan Yue laughed and said, there is no pure luck in this world, as expected. What should I do next? Huan Yue put the tea egg in front of him into his mouth and chewed it. After eating, he clapped his hands and said, boss, count the money. I'll come. Lu Feng hurriedly stood up and took out the money. Huan Yue reached out and pressed Lu Feng's arm down, and said, no bribes. It's our honor to have a master like you, starting from small things, starting from ourselves, and thoroughly implementing. Stop. Stop talking nonsense. The boss walked over and said, 7 cents. Huan Yue took out 80 cents from his pocket and handed it over. He walked towards the car across the road and said, this time I really can't do anything about it. You can do it yourself. If you can fight it, just fight it. If you can't resist it, it's really over. Let me tell you this, Hokan Copper and more than a dozen copper companies across the country, regardless of whether they are state-owned or private, have deep interests tied to each other. These copper companies have a unified price control over 80% of the domestic market share. So much, Lu Feng was also taken aback when he heard this data. Copper composite materials, they monopolize more than 95%, they have internal prices, and have deep cooperation with many state-owned enterprises. No one can shake it. Why do state-owned enterprises follow suit? Lu Feng asked in a low voice. Do you know how many state-owned enterprises are in the country? Can you manage them? Let me tell you, in state-owned enterprises, the general manager is no different from private enterprises except that they cannot sell the company. Therefore, state-owned enterprises need very urgent reforms. The situation is already very serious, and there are banks. Especially the local banks, Huang Yowei said solemnly. In terms of banks, Lu Feng knew that in the 1990s, not to mention local banks, the four major banks were very chaotic, and the bad debt rate once reached 40%. What is the concept of 40%? More than 5% of bad debts, and bad debts in general banks are already very high operating risks. More than 8% are facing bankruptcy. In the late 1990s, the bank was reorganized, and it was stunned that several trillions of bad debts were sorted out. The state really had no choice but to spin off these bad debts and set up a state-owned asset management company. That is trillions of dollars, and the ghost knows who is in the hands, whether it is drinking Moutai or eating a banquet. Huang Yowei lit a cigarette and was about to speak when Secretary Kui walked over to him. He waved his hand and said, "Go and wait for me in the car." Secretary Kui glanced at Lu Feng in surprise. He didn't know what the two of them were saying, but he couldn't listen, so he turned around and got into the car. Now I need you to open a hole. Why other people's technology is more advanced than you, and the price of a single product is so much lower than yours? It is the price of raw materials. If you can't form these raw materials into a free competitive market, then GFN Electronics will die. It's a matter of time. Huang Yowei took a puff and said, "That's how the electronics factory was surrounded and killed." They don't want to change, Lu Feng said in surprise. If you are a vested interest, will you give yourself a little more risk? They are now lying down to make money. They've already touched the anti-monopoly law. Huang Yowei sneered when he heard Lu Feng's words, and choked on his cigarette. In the next second, Lu Feng fully reacted. The anti-monopoly law is useful for companies that are about to monopolize. Once these companies that have been completely monopolized, once punished, it means the collapse of the industry. You have to grow up and be able to fill the vacant market, and you can't let the local copper industry have a market vacuum in an instant. What I am most afraid of now is to pull out Hokkien copper industry. The market will be chaotic, and a large number of copper industry will be destroyed. The company went bankrupt. Huang Yowei said sincerely, "You have to think from my point of view. I am the general manager of a state-owned enterprise, and I am transferred to this place, right?" Lu Feng nodded, indicating that he understood that he must do well, and if there is a slight error, the hat will not be guaranteed. After all, it is a popular saying now, no matter whether you are a black cat or a white cat, catching mice is the key. Even if I give up the Sichuan side now, it's useless. Huang Yowei shook his head and said, "Those who want to take you home, no matter how tortuous the road, they all drop by. Those who want to mess with you, it's no use hiding anywhere." Lu Feng made him amused by this metaphor. Huang Yowei could see that Lu Feng was uncomfortable. He had a headache when he saw this situation. It was no longer a lion fighting a rabbit, but an elephant stepping on an ant. Can the funds be solved later? At least you can't let me be killed in the market. It's obvious that the next wave of market terminal competition is coming. Brother. Don't call me brother, you can support me. I can call you dad, Lu Feng interrupted hurriedly. You two are polite. There are many people who want to be my son, and there are people who kneel on the ground and kowtow and beg me to be his father. Huang Yowei hugged Lu Feng's shoulder and said intimately, "I can cheer you on. I believe you must be able to walk a different path." Lu Feng could see that, now he is letting himself fight alone. By the way, there will be a National Enterprise Summit Forum in Guangzhou the day after tomorrow. Each city will recommend a company. I signed up for you. I heard that you will be invited to give a speech on the stage, and there will also be a National Youth Entrepreneurship Award. I think this award belongs to you. Corporate Summit Forum. Lu Feng stayed there and asked, that group of people will definitely go by then. Almost, you are also an influential figure in the industry now. You will definitely look up and not look down. Then what did I go to? Why are we arguing? I don't care about that. Anyway, you represent Suzhou now. Even if there is a quarrel, you have to win it for me. Huang Yue threw the cigarette butt and walked towards the car. After walking halfway, as if thinking of something, he came back and said, I'll give you a suggestion, don't talk about it, it's useless, you need to take the initiative. Watching the car leave, Lu Feng stood there and sighed. In this situation, it was extremely uncomfortable. He knew that Huang Yue wanted to help, but he couldn't. Lu Feng was about to go back, only to realize that he had come in Huang Yue's car. He scolded a few words, stopped a three-jumper, and went back to the factory to sit in the office, a little worried. After signing the appointments of several vice president candidates in front of him, and handling some daily affairs in the factory, Lu Feng has been waiting for Zhu Lidong's call. During lunch, Zhang Fengxia sat next to her and said, the person from the municipal administration handed over an invitation letter saying that there will be a business summit forum the day after tomorrow. I already know, Mr. Huang told me this morning. Is there any news from Mr. Zhu? Lu Feng put down his chopsticks and said, or, wait for me to call him. He said to call you at 3 in the afternoon. It is good. Lu Feng finished his meal and took a nap. After lunch, he was woken up by Zhang Fengxia at 3 o'clock. The call is coming. Lu Feng walked out of the bedroom, picked up the phone and said, tell me. Zhu Lidong's voice on the other end of the phone was a little embarrassing, and he coughed, Mr. Lu, let me tell you about the market conditions in Shandong and Hebei first. I don't want to hear this, I just want to know what's going on in Sichuan. As I said last time, the other party doesn't want to solve it, and they are collecting evidence recently, asking us to ban the use of brand names nationwide, and blackmailing us to illegally obtain land and property. The factory that we cooperated with before has run away, the responsibility is it's all ours. I have hired a lawyer to file a lawsuit locally. We are cooperating with that factory. Wait a minute, don't worry about these, this is a set, you have already set it up, you are not clear about it. Behind this company are mainly people from Changhong, Onfan, Hokan Copper Industry. You put the newly established company. The person in charge of the company faxed me the detailed information, and my order to you is, just one thing during this time, sleep. Sleep, Zhu Lidong's voice increased several times. Yes, don't bother anymore, you can't break through from the front, you need to start from the back, and I don't mean to blame you. Before you get this thing done, I don't recommend you to take too many actions in the market. It is very easy to attract come and besiege. Lu Feng pondered for a while and said, what we are most afraid of now is being besieged in the terminal market. Although Lu Feng's words were more euphemistic, Zhu Lidong was still not feeling well. The development of the market was his greatest confidence and the confidence of his words. All right. I'll be there in a few days. After Lu Feng finished speaking, he hung up the phone. Zhang Fengxia sat opposite and took a sip of water and said, why didn't you scold him? He tried his best, this is not something he can handle. If I made a mistake, if you scold me, he will try his best. Zhang Fengxia pouted and said, I have to call Sister Xiao Yan and tell me. Talk to her more. I feel like I'm going to be very busy recently. You persuade her to stop taking medicine. Lu Feng sighed. He couldn't express his feelings towards Zhang Xiaoyan. It's all there, it never fades away. 10 minutes later, the information was sent by fax. Lu Feng flipped through it and asked, how much money is in the account now? There are more than 20 million, Zhang Fengxia looked at him, not knowing what Lu Feng wanted to do. Looking at him like that, she always felt that he was in the same state as before, the state of living at the bottom with red eyes and fighting for life. Lu Feng recalled Huang Youwei's words in his mind, if this wave cannot be resisted, the death of GFN Electronics is only a matter of time. Since they are going to have a big fight, don't blame yourself for being rude, and said solemnly, bring me 20 million and play with them. High-speed text handwriting returns to the 1989 chapter list. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 308. 20 million? Joking. What are you going to do? Zhang Fengxia was frightened by his big money. If the money was withdrawn from the finances, the wages of the employees would be gone next month, and it was easy for the company to collapse in an instant. Those people want to drain my cash flow, then I will drain their cash flow first. If there is a problem with the funds in the factory, you can find a solution. Lu Feng looked at Zhang Fengxia and said, you should try to be on your own too. Me, Zhang Fengxia said embarrassedly, I don't understand finance. Do I know how to start a business? Lu Feng looked at her and said, it's very simple, find a few people from the bank, have a meal, and then tell them how much money our company will make in the future, and give some rebates. It's really not good, just ask someone from the municipality to vouch for it. We still owe the municipal government more than 200 million yuan. How dare they guarantee you? Zhang Fengxia rubbed her head with her hands. This company looks extraordinarily large on the surface. The core management all know that she owes a lot of debts. At the beginning of the year, she was still thinking about repaying the municipal debts this year. She did not expect that the sales were so good, and she still did not make any money. Don't worry, starting a business is like this. How can you make money when you start it? Lu Feng stood up and said, I'll hold a meeting with the finance, and let them buy a plane ticket by the way. Do you need me to go the day after tomorrow? What are you doing? Lu Feng looked at her and said, I will fly directly to Sichuan then. Zhang Fengxia muttered a few words, a little dissatisfied. She hadn't seen him at all during this period of time. She finally came back and scolded herself. She felt that she was similar to Sister Xiao Yan, and she was a widow. What are you mumbling about? It's nothing, I just miss you. A sweet smile appeared on Zhang Fengxia's face. Think less of me, think more about work when you have time. Zhang Fengxia rolled her eyes when she heard this, and walked out after him. Finance heard that Lu Feng was going to transfer 20 million yuan, and it blew up the pot on the spot. A few days ago, Zhu Lidong told them that they were ready to burn money, and the war in the terminal market was about to reignite. Mr. Lu, if 20 million is transferred, there will be less than 3 million left on the account. At that time, even the salary will not be paid, and there are a group of suppliers who will pay the bill soon. 3 million is really not enough. And you didn't say what to do? This is the company, not you alone. There are many management holdings. I can't say what the money will be used for the time being. Lu Feng looked around, holding a pen in his hand, he tapped the table back and forth, and said, who else is against it? I'm against it. A man in his 30s stood up, his face stern, rather like a ruthless character who turned the tide. Very good, Lu Feng gave him an admiring look and said, you were fired. The man is so stupid standing there, he just lost his job. Mr. Lu, I mean. Go to the personnel department to go through the formalities. Lu Feng looked at him and said. The man was very aggrieved, and left the office after a long while. You can discuss it with me, but what is to be divided, this matter is decided. Lu Feng stood up and said, buy me a plane ticket to Guangzhou, and when I leave, I hope these 2,000 yuan is ready, and after I leave, I will help President Zhang to get a loan, and I believe that as long as I get through this period of time, I will see the light in the end. During this period, with the increase in sales, the entire factory relaxed, especially the management. During the whole day, the management was tense again. Everyone thought that GFN Electronics was on the verge of victory, but only now did they realize that it had never gained a firm foothold, and even swayed on the verge of bankruptcy at any time. The next morning, Lu Feng set foot on the plane to Guangzhou. It was the end of March. The weather here was just right, comfortable and pleasant, but it was extremely hot and dry, which was comparable to midsummer. As soon as he entered the gate of the airport, Lu Feng saw people number 7 or 8. A man in his 50s or 60s stood in the middle, staring at Lu Feng as if he was waiting for him. "Mr. Li is waiting for me here," Lu Feng looked him up and down and asked. "No, just came back." "Where is Mr. Lu going?" Mr. Li glanced behind Lu Feng and said, "Why don't you even bring bodyguards and assistants?" "I don't like shouting and hugging, but Mr. Li is very flamboyant." "Where is this going?" "Guess." Mr. Li smiled slightly, with the charm of a refined villain in the movie, and said, "Mr. Lu, this should be Guangzhou, the only one in the city. Huang Yue gave you, you can't live up to his expectations." "Don't worry, Mr. Li, I will definitely work hard." "You came back from Sichuan, right?" Mr. Li smiled and didn't speak. As if everything was silent, he strode towards the outside, and Lu Feng watched his back leave. He knew that Mr. Li was waiting for him here. He should stay in Suzhou for a while until the uncertain figure in the industry of Lu Feng disappeared, or Huang Yue left his post. At 9:30 in the morning, the plane landed in Guangzhou. Lu Feng walked out of the airport, a heat wave hit his face, and he searched around. The original communication on the phone was that there would be a commercial vehicle to pick him up. After turning around, he found that there was only one black commercial car parked there. Lu Feng stepped forward and knocked on the window. The driver lowered the window and looked at Lu Feng. "Is this the car for the Enterprise Summit Forum?" "Yeah, you're the one from GFN Electronics, right?" The driver was not too polite. He picked up a notebook from the side, glanced at it, and said, "Lu Feng." "Right. Just waiting for you, get in the car." Lu Feng was a little dissatisfied with the driver's attitude, but he didn't think much about it. Now the airport bus is not very convenient. As for the poor number of taxis, it is not a problem to always wait here. When he opened the car door, he found that there were still 2 women sitting inside. One was in her 40s. She was dressed very luxuriously, with an indescribable scent of perfume, and she was full of luxury goods. She looked at Lu Feng with disgust, not wanting to get close. The other 27-8, with arrogance on his face, squinted his eyes and glanced at Lu Feng, and said, "Master, with such a big summit forum, can't we give the boss a car?" The driver obviously encountered this kind of person a lot today, so he turned his head and said to Lu Feng, "Get in the car quickly and tell you guys, it's just this car, you can take a seat if you want, I can't help it if you don't want to, don't say anything boss, I'll take it today. It's all bosses." "The boss is also divided into sizes," the woman said dissatisfied. Lu Feng got into the car and was about to sit in the front row. The young woman frowned and said, "Sit in the back." "Don't sit here, I don't want to smell his sweat." The woman in the back row was full of disgust. Lu Feng didn't have time to listen to the 2 of them talking about bullshit. He sat down beside the young woman and closed the car door and said, "Master, let's go." The young woman also had a bit of beauty. She sat inside and looked at Lu Feng carefully. The clothes on her body were not brand name, but the material was not bad. "I come to this kind of summit every year. In those years, I followed my father's company. This year, I also started a business myself. I thought it would be difficult to enter this kind of forum. I didn't expect to receive an invitation in the first year of business." The woman helpless said. "Yeah, little sister, I've been here every year. Last year was not like this. Last year's service attitude was very good. I don't know why this year." The woman behind sighed, "If I knew this, I should have put my Mercedes come by air." Lu Feng watched the 2 of them come and go, and they chatted very enthusiastically. "You're here for the first time, aren't you?" the young woman asked. Lu Feng nodded and said, "Yes." Looking at him, "You know it's the first time to participate. Let me tell you, there are a lot of bosses coming this time, and you need to make more friends, understand? What company do you work for?" "In terms of electronics, it's just a small business," Lu Feng said politely. "Is there a small business in electronics?" "What's your name?" Lu Feng asked. "Just call me President Joe," said the older woman. "I started from scratch. In our city, I am definitely a thriving existence. I am still the richest man in our city." "Really?" "I'm also the richest woman in our city," the young woman said happily, as if she had found a confidant. "With our status, participating in such a summit really gave him enough face." When Lu Feng heard that they were the two richest men, he embarrassedly said, "I'm really not as good as the two. I can't even get close to the richest man." "It's all right, take your time, I also came from your time. The most important thing in doing business is network," Mr. Zhou said to Lu Feng as if pointing to a newcomer. "You follow my sister, I often come to the summit, they're all acquaintances." Yes, even if you don't know other people, know President Zhou, and know me." The young woman looked at Lu Feng proudly and said, "It is also an honor for you in this life." Lu Feng felt that the two women were very rude, and some couldn't help but want to say that his company was not that bad, but the driver couldn't help it first. "Can we not blow it? This Enterprise Summit Forum is held for the first time this year." For a moment, the interior of the car was filled with embarrassment, and even the air conditioning seemed to be a bit cold. Lu Feng could feel the words of the driver's master, which completely broke the defense of the two, and coughed. "Do the two bosses have anything to explain?" Mr. Zhou tapped Erlang's leg to relieve the embarrassment, and said, "I have participated in many such activities, and they are all similar, changing the soup or not." "Yes, it's not surprising," the young woman asked. "Have you participated?" "What's your name?" "I have participated a few times before, but I haven't participated this year." "My surname is Lu, and my name is a peak of a mountain," Lu Feng said politely. "My name is Li Dan, you can just call me President Li. My family is an entrepreneurial family," Li Dan said proudly. "My father is an entrepreneur, my mother is an entrepreneur, and I am naturally an entrepreneur." "A family of 3 entrepreneurs?" Lu Feng had never heard of such a powerful family in China. "What industry does Ling Zun do?" "My dad is a mutton maker, and my mom is a seed company, so I'm more high-end." Li Dan cleared his throat and said, "Internet, do you know?" "The Internet?" As soon as Lu Feng heard these 3 words, he knew that this was the second generation of a prodigal rich man. HTT. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 309. The current internet trend has blown into the country, and some Yellow Pages websites have been opened intermittently, but the scale is not too large, and more of them are published in newspapers. In 1991, the internet had experienced a wave of bubbles abroad. The big guys who had access to the internet earlier began to return to China to seek new internet soil. The 2 biggest buzzwords in the 1990s were the internet and qigong. Seeing that Lu Feng and President Zhou were a little stunned, Li Dan seemed to be frightened by the word internet, and said, "What? You two don't know the internet? It's the internet." As Li Dan spoke, a sense of superiority appeared on his face, and he was extraordinarily arrogant. "I know the internet. I still have a computer at home," Mr. Zhou said with a smile. "Give me the URL of your website, and I'll go check it out then." Li Dan handed over a business card, looked at Lu Feng, and asked, "Are you online?" Lu Feng shook his head. It is indeed possible to surf the internet in China now, but for a user like Lu Feng who surfed the internet fast in his previous life, the current internet is too slow, and the content is very boring. Most of them are pictures, text, etc. simple things like numbers. I'll give you a business card and go back and buy a computer. It's not expensive, it's just over 20,000. Mr. Joe nodded again and echoed, current computers are really cheap, you can buy a good one for 20,000 to 30,000 yuan. I used to have a computer at home, but the nanny broke it and I was so angry. I wanted to let her go at that time, if there were not 7 or 8 nannies left to plead for mercy, I really wanted her to get out. That's right, I also have the same troubles. There are many servants at home, and I'm very annoying. Regardless of how much money I make, I spend a lot. I'm called the richest woman all day long. In fact, I work from outside and I don't have much money, Li Dan said with a worried look, when you wish you were an ordinary person. Then you can donate all the money, Lu Feng said very straight. I mean, I want to have the simple and easy to satisfy mentality of ordinary people. Li Dan looked at Lu Feng and asked, how much are you worth? Me, Lu Feng thought about it for a moment. Although he owns 2 companies, GMA only has 30% of the equity remaining. If Jiafeng is concerned, he still owes a lot of debt. Not much, that is, more than 10 million. Lu Feng said the numbers casually. He thought that those who can come to this kind of summit are all excellent companies selected by each city. Besides, as an entrepreneur, no matter how poor it is, it's the same. Unexpectedly, Li Dan and President Zhou were secretly surprised when they heard the number reported by Lu Feng. More than 10 million is by no means a small number, not to mention that Lu Feng is still so young. Is your father in electronics? Mr. Zhou asked. No. Seeing that Lu Feng didn't really want to communicate, the two of them fell into a brief silence in the car. President Zhou asked the driver, how long will it take? It will take more than half an hour, the master said without looking back. Although the air conditioner in the car is very powerful, there is still hot air entering the car. Li Dan cleared his throat, took a sip of water, and said, it was worth more than 10 million yuan, which was fine in the 1980s, but now enough is enough. President Zhou followed up, prices have been rising in the past 2 years, and money is worthless. More than 10 million is not money. Lu Feng looked at the two of them, feeling that he couldn't calm down for a long time. After chatting all the way, he also heard that these 2 women would die if they didn't talk about it. I also know that I don't have much money, so I just came to open my eyes, Lu Feng said humbly. Mr. Zhou laughed when he heard Lu Feng's words. In the end, he was better than herself. She knew that there were only a few top rich people in this kind of conference. Came to cheer. It's all right, you'll follow my sister and show you some people to make sure you're a duck to water in the electronics industry, President Zhou assured Lu Feng. As if she opened her mouth. Lu Feng will be able to sit firmly on the Diaotai in the industry. How old are you this year? Li Dan asked. I'm 25. You're younger than me. Your age is mainly to make contacts. I also came here from your time. Don't worry, follow us, you won't suffer. That's right, don't panic, I've experienced this kind of scene once, and I'll say it next time. What the two of them thought in their hearts was that, in such a big scene, when they came for the first time, they would definitely be big bosses by then, and it would be a foil to bring someone by their side. Lu Feng is a good person, he is not ugly, he has a net worth of more than 10 million yuan, and he is still in the hot electronics industry. With such a boss by his side, he seems to have a lot of identity, and other people naturally dare not neglect him. Lu Feng wanted to refuse, but he thought again, it would be good to have these 2 people by his side, he would definitely be the target of siege this time, maybe these 2 people could share the fire. Along the way, Lu Feng listened obediently like a little brother to the two of them, From the local market, to international hot topics, to travel, what to feel the inner peace in Lagu Lake, what to eat lobster in Australia, and what to play with penguins in the Arctic. And cried under the Eiffel Tower. The car finally stopped at the door of the venue. Lu Feng opened the door, took a deep breath, and said something from the bottom of his heart, "These two girls are really humming good at it." Little Lu, President Zhou handed the handbag to Lu Feng and said, "Help me get it." Lu Feng looked at her bag and then glanced at her again. He just said a few polite words to her, and humbly said that he was a primary school student in the industry and needed more advice from the two sisters. How did the identity change so much in just half an hour? "Take it." Lu Feng reached out and took it. "Help me hold the water glass, go in later to see where there is a mineral water cellar, buy a bottle and add it to it." Li Dan handed the glass over. In less than 2 minutes, Lu Feng hung 3 bags on his body and held a lady's water bottle. He looked like a small attendant. The two got out of the car, tidied up their hair, and put on big sunglasses. The two stepped into the venue with high heels. "Hello, please show the invitation letter, and we will exchange it for you with a pass," a reception girl said. The two found out their invitation letter and handed it over. Lu Feng also hurriedly took out his invitation letter. The girl at the reception gave Lu Feng a surprised look. She thought Lu Feng was an assistant, but she didn't realize that he was also the invited person. "When I saw Mr. Lu Feng, chairman of Suzhou Jiafeng Electronics Co., Limited, on the invitation card, I was stunned again. This kind of enterprise selected according to the city, the bigger the city, the better the enterprise. The first two are from small cities in the northwest region, and some of them have never heard of it. The city where Lu Feng is located should logically not carry bags for these two, right?" What the girl thought for a moment was that the young boss was looking at the young girl. She glanced at Li Dan, who looked a lot worse than her own. Her eyes lit up, she looked at Lu Feng with a smile, and her eyes twitched. In an instant, her whole body swayed. The chance of life was just this moment, and the chance of marrying into a wealthy family came. "Sir, this is your pass." The girl handed over a badge with both hands, and when she put it on Lu Feng's hand, her fingers quietly scratched in his palm. Lu Feng felt the tickling in his hands and looked at the girl, wondering what was going on with her. "Mr. Lu, is it convenient to leave a contact information?" The girl's eyes were about to come out of water, constantly releasing high-voltage electricity. "Inconvenient," Lu Feng simply refused. "Little Lu, hurry up," President Zhou urged. "Come on," Lu Feng trotted in. "What are you doing? You have to know what you are doing here. I told you in the car, be smart." Mr. Zhou complained while looking at Lu Feng. "Yes, this kind of opportunity is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you, and it is definitely a big boost for your growth." Li Dan looked at President Zhou and said, "Didn't you introduce him to the industry leaders?" "Yes, he should be here. Let's hurry up, the conference should start in a while." After Mr. Zhou finished speaking, he walked inside, looking for someone while walking. Lu Feng glanced at the venue. There were probably thousands of chairs, each with a name written on the back, and the microphone was already being tested on the stage. This conference is divided into 2 parts. In the morning, it is the overall conference. Various chambers of commerce, associations, and leaders of business management give speeches. In the afternoon, there are sub-venues of various industries. This is also the reason why Lu Feng felt that he would definitely fight in the afternoon. He was not very popular in the industry. There. President Zhou strode towards a group of middle-aged men, and said enthusiastically to one of the men in suits and leather shoes, "President Wang, it's been a long time, I'm getting more and more handsome." The man looked at Mr. Zhou and said in surprise, "Are you Zhou Fang?" Yes, do you still remember me? I haven't seen you for several years, and President Zhou is getting more and more beautiful. I was really surprised to learn that you are here this time." That's right, you must have a good drink tonight, Mr. Wang. Are you still doing electronics? Mr. Zhou asked. Yes, the development is okay now, and I am the best in our city. That's great, I'll introduce someone to you, a young man, Mr. Zhou said. He pulled Lu Feng over and said, he also does electronics. This is Mr. Wang, a leading company in the electronics industry in Linfen. President Wang glanced at Lu Feng, frowning secretly. Such a young person, still doing electronics? It's not bluffing. But looking at Mr. Zhou's face, he didn't say anything. He smiled. When Lu Feng was polite to him, it was impossible for them to reach out and shake his hand first. Lu Feng was also used to others reaching out to shake hands with him, and he felt a little embarrassed for a moment. Handshake, Li Dan reminded in a low voice. Lu Feng stretched out his hand and said, hello, my name is Lu Feng. President Wang's expression was not very good looking, but he still shook it. Young people, don't take offense if you're not very sensible, Mr. Zhou explained. High-speed text handwriting returns to the 1989 chapter list. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 310. Change the business card, Li Dan said from the side. Lu Feng, if there is something you don't understand, you can ask President Wang for more advice. I believe that President Wang will also be happy to give advice to the younger generation. Lu Feng was about to take out his business card. President Wang put a business card between his fingers and put it on Lu Feng's shirt pocket, and said, forget your business card. The scene was a little embarrassing. Lu Feng frowned secretly. This is too insulting, isn't it? Mr. Zhou sat on the sidelines and said, I'll tell you, Mr. Wang is very good to people. Why don't you thank Mr. Wang soon? Thank you. Lu Feng didn't smile very happily. His tone was perfunctory, and he didn't feel the slightest respect. President Zhou's face changed towards Lu Feng, and he reached out and hit him on the arm. Young man, please take care of Mr. Wang. This little Lu is one of my younger brothers. I now have several companies under my control, and the annual turnover is over 100 million yuan. To be honest, after so many years, it's very ordinary, President Zhou said in general, but there was a smile on his face. Introduce those people. What does Zhou always do? Asked a tall man in his 40s. For passenger transportation, and catering, I plan to form a group next year, and I will also get a big one. How about you? President Zhou said politely. I'm in coking coal, and Tongmei Group also runs the business in Pingdingshan. Coal mine resources, hello. Mr. Zhou was very polite and greeted everyone and exchanged business cards. This wave of 7 or 8 people chatted very hotly, and she was like a duck in water. Standing there, Li Dan felt a little out of place. When chatting about it, President Wang turned around and looked for a circle of waiters. No one was found. He looked at Lu Feng and waved, pour a glass of water. Me, Lu Feng was a little dumbfounded. Has he become a waiter? Young people are ignorant, don't mind, President Zhou said to Lu Feng, go find someone to get a glass of water, this is impossible. Lu Feng took a deep breath and wanted to turn his head. After thinking about it, he endured it. When he saw a waiter not far away, he waved his hand and handed over a few glasses of water. Soon, Li Dan was also familiar with them. These people were talking and laughing. Lu Feng stood aside like a piece of wood. President Wang glanced at Lu Feng and whispered, President Zhou, why do you bring this kind of person? I came with him. The commercial vehicle sent here will pick it up. If you can invite them, there must be some goods. I asked, and the assets are more than 10 million, Mr. Zhou whispered. As far as his virtue is concerned, he is worth more than 10 million yuan. President Wang shook his head and said, how many years have I been in the business world with my eyes? This person may have a little money and spent money to buy tickets. Can you still buy tickets for this kind of place? Isn't it said that a city elects a company? Some leading local companies think that this kind of summit is meaningless and don't want to come, or the leaders of the local municipal government want to make some extra money and sell their tickets directly to some small and medium-sized enterprises. I just met one and bought it for 50,000 yuan. If that's the case, he really means that. That's right. How old is he, and he has more than 10 million yuan. He is bragging and doesn't make drafts. President Wang sorted out his clothes and whispered, I'll ask. President Wang walked over, looked at Lu Feng with a professional businessman's smile, and asked with a little local accent, Lady, are you in the electronics industry? Yes, Lu Feng also noticed that he didn't need to be polite to these people. It's enough to say his own strength without talking too much. What is the market value of the company? Market value? I haven't done a valuation yet, but judging from the current brand power, shipments, and market share, I think more than 1 billion is no problem, Lu Feng said seriously. President Wang just took a sip of water and spit it out when he heard this. 1 billion? Don't you mean more than 10 million? Not to mention President Wang, even the others couldn't help but be amused. Lu Feng stood there, with his young face and serious look, saying a number like 1 billion, in the eyes of these bosses, he was just making an axe at the door. It looks so funny. Mr. Wang coughed while laughing, looked at Mr. Zhou and said, Mr. Zhou can do it. The younger brothers are all people worth more than 1 billion yuan. Ha 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 ha. The crowd burst into laughter again. Mr. Zhou's face was full of embarrassment. He glanced at Lu Feng. Originally, he wanted him to set off his strength, but now he is making a joke. The host on the stage has come up, holding the microphone, and said, Dear entrepreneurs, good morning everyone, our summit will start soon, please find your seat as soon as possible, thank you for your cooperation. President Wang said to everyone, let's all sit first, it's hard to find so many places. Everyone walked in the direction of the location. Li Dan walked to Lu Feng's side and said, Don't be so dumb, it's just a joke. If you haven't seen the world at first glance, bragging is not so bragging, a dozen or so. Who will believe it? What I said is true, Lu Feng looked at her and said helplessly. Li Dan rolled his eyes, walked to his seat, and said, Where are you sitting? Lu Feng really doesn't know this. So many seats are hard to find. Mr. Zhou and Mr. Wang were all in the second and third rows from the bottom, and they all found their seats. Mr. Zhou looked at Lu Feng and said, Look for your seat. Lu Feng looked at a staff member and waved. Sir, do you need any help? I want to know which row I sit in. Sir, our position is ranked according to worth. The further forward the entrepreneur is, the more honorable it is, the staff explained. As soon as these words came out, these people laughed again. Mr. Zhou felt that Lu Feng had embarrassed her. She now regretted talking to Lu Feng in the car, and said, Go to the last row and look for it. The crowd burst into laughter again. Sir, can I take a look at your pass? The staff member said. Okay, Lu Feng took off the badge and handed it to her. She glanced at it, the expression on her face changed, and then glanced at Lu Feng again, hurriedly put on a standard smile, and handed over the badge with both hands. Keep it. Lu Feng hung the sign on his neck again. Is it the last row? President Wang teased. It's the last row, and troublesome little girls. It is estimated that I want to pick up a girl, but also, people are worth more than 1 billion yuan, so it's not easy to pick a girl. Ha 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 ha. The staff member stretched out a hand, made a gesture of invitation, and said, Mr. Lu, your seat is in the first row, I'll take you there. All the laughter stopped abruptly, and this group of people seemed to be strangled by the neck in an instant. The smile on their faces was frozen for 2 seconds, and that unbridled smile hit them in the face like a loud slap at this moment. The first row, Mr. Wang couldn't be convinced. How is this possible? Didn't you say that the more you move forward, the more honorable you are. His first row. Mr. Joe was already dumbfounded in his seat. What did he miss? President Wang was even more dumbfounded, and when he recalled what he said, his mind went blank. Lu Feng walked to the first row, and he was almost seated in front of him. President Lu of Lenovo was sitting next to him. The two looked at each other and didn't speak. On the right is Jiao Anfan, the bosses of Changhong, Konka, and Haier are sitting in this row. When Lu Feng sat down, everyone leaned forward and stared at Lu Feng, full of hostility. Mr. Lu's attention at such a young age can be regarded as an achievement in life, Mr. Lu said casually. We're friends, right? Lu Feng leaned back on his chair and said, I didn't make a computer. Why didn't Zhu Lidong come? Have no face to see me. He's been busy recently, Mr. Lu, don't hold grudges, he's your employee, not your wife, Lu Feng said. Jiao Anfan on the side sneered, Lu Feng, your fate today is entirely your own problem. I tell you, people like you can't survive in the business world. Lu Feng turned his head and glanced at him, always so elegant and handsome, with a faint scent of perfume on his body. Lu Feng said, you are handsome again. It's useful to please me. I'm not trying to please you, I'm telling the truth, but you're really worthless. It's really sad that a big man is handsome and has nothing. Lu Feng crossed Erlang's legs and said, you still have sales left. How much? We're on track to exceed 1.5 million units this year. Sales are Jiao Anfan's pain. Although the market is expanding, the problem is that the high-end market will always be small. Without Lu Feng, the TV market would be able to maintain prices. Now everyone is fighting a price war, paying attention to cost effectiveness, and what high-end TVs should cost by. In the past month, sales have been cut in half. Lu Feng is not only dragging Anfan high-end TVs, but also dragging the entire industry. Compared with last year, the price of color TVs this year has been reduced by 15%. You should take care of yourself and live until the summer, Jiao Anfan said gloomily. Seeing him like this, Lu Feng felt that this handsome young man was very funny. He obviously hated him to death, but he didn't dare to swear, for fear of affecting his image. You have to die before me. Humph, don't talk to me, just wait and see. Jiao Anfan put his hands on his chest, looking like he was refusing to be thousands of miles away. Lu Feng didn't talk to him, and asked Mr. Lu, besieged me, is there Mr. Lu in the siege? I want to kill you too, but I don't need it. It's easy for a dozen eagles to hunt a rabbit. Really? Then I have to show you a wave of rabbits kicking eagles. Lu Feng grinned, looking pure and flawless, revealing a row of white teeth. High-speed text handwriting returns to the 1989 chapter list.